So where does the White House go from here? What is the everlasting solution? Let's bring in our panel. Capri Cafaro, former Ohio State Senate Minority Leader and current Washington Examiner contributor. Gina Loudon, a Donald J. Trump for President Advisory Board member, and Beverly Hallberg, District Media Group President. Beverly, I'll start with you here. Just unprecedented, remarkable what we just saw there. These events have happened for 19 years since Columbine. To have the President of the United States invite the victims in for them to be able to pour their hearts out like that, you have to believe that something different will happen as a consequence of that.
Well, it's really heartbreaking to hear that father talk about never seeing his daughter again. I also give students a lot of credit who are using their free speech rights to talk about what they experienced. It's very brave of them to talk about something that's so horrific. But I hope this does lead to a thorough conversation about how we actually get to the bottom of these types of issues. It's a one-sided conversation if we're purely talking about guns and legislation. Because let's not forget, a lot of this has to do with mental illness and the breakdown of the family. This is a cultural issue, and I'm hoping that what this leads to is an open conversation. I think today is a good way to start, but we need to continue to talk about the many facets and not make this all about gun control.
You know, Gina, of course, President Trump, the first thing he talked about, or at least he mentioned in a tweet after this incident occurred, was mental health and mental health issues. And I know we need to have these conversations to Beverly's point, but I think people also are very prepared for solutions. And President Trump is a solutions-oriented president. So, you have the psychology background, you're a mother, you understand these sort of things, you're a resident of Florida. Where do you see this going from here?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Charles, because, we want solutions like that father so eloquently outlined. And mental health, throwing money at mental health is not a solution for so many reasons, starting with the fact that 70% of the American population could be diagnosed by the Diagnostics and Statistics Manual that psychologists use to diagnose with a mental issue. We can't just put everybody in a mental hospital and take away their Second Amendment rights who might be diagnosed.
Can we find a way of preventing people who are obviously as deranged as Nicholas Cruz was from ever owning a weapon?
Yeah. Well, I think that that's exactly what the president's looking at, and I commend him for listening as he did. I mean, what he did today was beyond searching for solutions. It was also giving these families a chance to vent and to reconcile their grief. It was almost a therapeutic thing what the president did today, and I strongly commend him for even setting down the microphone in those moments so that he could hear what they had to say rather than be prepared to talk. It was really a moment in our history that I think we'll never forget. I think we'll see good changes.
Capri, you're one of the more level-headed politicians, for lack of a better term here. In other words, I really feel like you're someone who's not wedded to a particular ideology. You listen to each topic and you take a common-sense approach. And I'm bringing this up only because we saw a DACA offer from President Trump that I thought was something the Democrats would jump all over. I just thought he gave in, and he gave them numbers that you couldn't imagine. And you have to wonder, whatever comes out of the White House, will there be bipartisan support, or will there be sort of the nitpicking in politics that we've seen with every other issue so far?
Well, I think that this is going to be challenging for Congress simply because of the political dynamics, unfortunately. And I do come to this issue with a kind of a unique perspective because not only was I a Democrat endorsed by the NRA for my entire elected career, but I also tragically had a school shooting in my district where 3 kids were killed at Chardon High School in Chardon, Ohio, back in 2012. And so this is not just about a federal solution. This is about a state and local solution. This is about having a legitimate conversation about everything from bump stocks to background checks. It's about engaging the school board on school safety issues of, law enforcement. For example, one of the things that the community in Ohio that I represented after the school shooting, they said, we don't want metal detectors. That's not the kind of community we want. And they opted for, active shooter training. They wanted locks on the doors. There's a number of things. And retired law enforcement, for example, was something else they talked about. Ohio had had a school safety task force that they assembled. And so I think we need the state, local, and federal officials to all come together. And, I think in this particular instance, not only does the American public deserve an honest conversation about everything, again, from guns to mental health, but Democrats and Republicans alike need to come to the table. It's going to take legislative action. There's only so much President Trump can do unilaterally through executive action, for example.
Right. And Beverly, to that point, people want their schools to look friendly and aesthetically to be attractive. But that was how we were in New York. After 9/11, we didn't really want to see armed military people walking around with machine guns. It was a new reality, but it was indeed our reality that we had to live with. And so if schools don't want metal detectors and things like that, I think that, we're going to have to find solutions that not everyone's going to agree on.
Yeah, and this is why I was just going to say, what you can find is that different schools want to handle this in different ways based on their community. I think they should be able to decide for themselves what works. And you talk about solutions. I actually think that there are some easier solutions. And one is that we hear this phrase, you mentioned terrorism, if you see something, say something. Well, people saw something with Nicholas Cruz. Let's not forget the FBI was notified. Let's not forget that teachers were concerned and reached out to law enforcement. Even a blogger, based on one of the comments that Nicholas Cruz put out there, turned him in, said, hey, I'm concerned about this guy. I actually think it's when we know the people in our community, when we know the people around us, we can speak up. What I think is that when you take a look at the school, law enforcement and the FBI really failed these kids.
There's no doubt about that. In fact, the FBI actually interrogated the guy who saw the YouTube video and flagged it. Can you imagine that? He was brought in, and according to Judge Napolitano, there were only 7 people in this country named Nicholas Cruz, spelled with the K. Just absolutely remarkable how easy he could have been tracked down and interrogated, or at least interviewed. Gina, again, I get back to this notion that Parkland was voted last year the safest city in Florida. So, maybe a city like that doesn't think they need armed guards, or they don't want their school to have barracks or lockdown mechanisms that aren't attractive or intimidating. But isn't that a new reality? And also perhaps the teachers, some teachers being armed. I saw a lot of pushback in a meeting on that. But it's really difficult to have law enforcement react to these things in time because they happen so quickly.
Well, of course, there's going to be emotional reaction in this time of tragedy for these young people who maybe haven't thoroughly examined the issue and are in a state of grief right now, Charles. I think it's really important to note, and I think the president said this, and one of the moms said this too, that, there's not a person in the whole country, maybe this is my surmisement, but there's not a person in the whole country that if you could save one child's life would not give up their guns today. But the fact is that doesn't happen. That can't happen. Taking away guns doesn't save lives when you take them away across the board and without reason. So we have to look for sensible solutions. And I thought the president stated some very eloquently about arming teachers, as you mentioned, about arming former military. And even though we may not like it, Charles, things that feel good emotionally don't work a lot of times. We have to look for what actually works here. And this is very similar to me to the argument of illegal immigration. You build the wall first, you secure the country, then you have your illegal immigration debate. Same thing here. Secure it, then have the gun debate.
All right, ladies, thank you all very, very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.